Welcome to your channel Rayofhope, and this is going to be another day for our web application penetration testing and probably last day for our union based injection attack, right? Basically in this module what we are going to do, we will try to retrieve the data from a single table. Means a single table will consist passport and username both, right? So what we need to do, the end goal for this lab is to identify the username and the passport that the table has, right? And apart from that, we will also identify the what kind of database is this, what kind of data type it is using, and what is the version name, right? So this is the end goal for this lab. So let's go ahead and start working on it. The first and foremost, guys, we always know and we have been talking about, we need to identify that do we have any parameter over here. For that we have multiple category, right? So if I go ahead and click on any of them, like I'm clicking on gift, you can click on any of them like lifestyles or tech gifts or anything. Let's consider lifestyle, right? So I have a parameter. So basically a parameter, that means we can inject a malicious code over there, right? Even though before going to inject any sort of code, right, we need to identify if it is reflecting, because we know there are two ways to identify if the application is vulnerable for union injection or not, which are like if there is any projection point or throwing an error, right? So if I go ahead and change this to ray of hope and hit enter, there you go. Whatever input we are providing, it is getting projecting, or you can say reflected on the screen, right? Therefore we can say it is potentially vulnerable for union injection, right? So the next step would be is to intercept the data to perform further exploitation. For that, what I'm gonna do, I'll turn on the intercept, turn on the proxy. Let's intercept the data. I got it. Let's send it to the repeater to save the HTTP request. Actually, turn off the intercept, turn off the proxy. Now we have a request that we can play a request and response over here, right? So this is how the normal request look like, right? So as we know, it is potentially vulnerable for union injection. The next step would be is to identify what is the developer written code, right? What is the syntax? Are we, like if we provide a double quote, single quote, close braces or anything like that, are they going to break the query, or which syntax will break the query? So for that we would need to identify, right? So if I put like double quote, close braces, no, it is not showing us any error. If I put like double quote only, it is still not giving us any error. If I put single quote, it is giving a internal server error, which means probably it could be interacting with the database and it breaks the query. If it breaks the query, that confirms that this application would be vulnerable for SQL injection, especially union injection, right? So now, as we know that a single quote breaks the query, we would need to identify how many database are there, right? I mean how many columns are there. For that, we are going to use this order by one hyphen hyphen. It is giving us 1, I mean 200. Okay, that means one column is there. Now it is also giving us 200. Okay, that means two columns are there. If I give 3, it is giving us an internal server error, which means there are only 2 columns, right? So now as we identify that we have 2 columns, right? So next step is to identify what is the database type, right? Like what is the version, data type actually, right? And to identify the data type we would be using union select, right? So if I do union select 1 comma 2, so now I am using integer type and hit enter. It is giving me an internal server error. That means it is not is of like integer type. So if I am going to use this ray comma space ray single quote ray and close it and hit enter, it is still giving us internal server error, which means it is neither of integer type nor of string type, or it would be both actually, but we don't know now, right? So for that we are going to use null ray. It is giving us 200. Okay, that means the second column is of string type, and whatever data we have to retrieve from this column. You got it? So now we got this. So what would be the next step is to find out the username and the password from the table, right? And for that we are going to use the default table, which is users. So if I use null user name from users, it's providing us 200. Okay, administrator. So what I'm gonna do right now, I'll open my notepad, paste it. Now I have a administrator name, right? What next is to identify the password. Okay, so the first ID was admin, right? Therefore this would be the password, right? So now we got this. So once we have a username and password column, right? So what next we are going to do? If right now I use the separate columns, right? Again, I tried 2 times, like by giving password and users at once, right? At once, right? But now if I want to try everything together, how I can do so? For that we have a command like this. Okay, for that first need to identify what kind of version it is actually. So we all know that in SQLInjection we have multiple databases like MySQL, PostgreSQL, MS SQL, Oracle, and whatnot. So now what I'm gonna do, suppose if it is of MS SQL database, so I'm gonna use like this @version and hit enter. It is giving us an internal server error, which means it is not of MS SQL database. Now as we identify it is not a MS SQL database, let's give a try with PostgreSQL database. So for that I'm gonna use like this: version, open braces, close braces, and send. Now, as we identified that this is of a PostgreSQL database, and we can see this is the version details, right? This is the version. This is the version, right? So we have identified a version of the database as well. Next one, I told you that I want to call password and username at once. So how we can do so? For that, we will be using user name, right? Username, and we will separate this with this actually. This is a OR command in Postgre. This is a OR command in Postgre. So if I hit send, right, and then we look over here, you can see we have username and passport at a place only, right, at one place. You can see it is separated. This is the administrator and this is the passport, right? So now what we gonna do is to click on my account, copy, copy, one second. Why it is happening? Okay, this was the password. There you go. So finally we have solved the lab, right? So this is how the union injection you can perform, and you can retrieve data from a single table, right, or a single column actually. So I believe you must have loved this union injection series, and if you have any sort of question related to union injection, feel free to comment and I would be happy to help you with that. Thank you.